Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. For this month's Bird Notes program, we're going to get an update on Vermont's endangered common tern population. Joining us from the Green Mountain Audubon Center in Huntington is bird expert and conservation biologist Mark LaBarr. Thanks so much for being with us, Mark.
Always glad to be here.
So before we dive into Vermont's common terns, you wanted to revisit something from our last show.
Yeah, so last show, folks remember, we talked about the Vermont Habitat Stamp Program. Great program by the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. But I didn't get a chance to give out the web address. No, folks can just Google Vermont Habitat Stamp, but the web address is vtfishandwildlife.com/VT Habitat Stamp. And the VT Fish and Wildlife and the VT Habitat Stamp are all one word.
Terrific, and it's doing such great work that that money goes to fabulous and important work with
Yes,
birds
does.
and habitat. So, so tell us about the work that Audubon is doing and continues to do with the common tern.
Well, a favorite of mine, as I've been doing common tern work now for a number of years, to say the least.
30 some odd, perhaps?
I'd like to give an update every year, and here we've got a common tern, beautiful bird, a lake bird that eats fish, sitting on top of one of the buoys that we put out around its nesting islands to keep folks away and allow them to nest. So yeah, the terns are, they're a great passion of mine.
So remind us where these birds nest, up in the northern part of Lake Champlain?
Yeah, so they nest on the northern part of the lake in what folks call the Inland Sea, which is the northeast arm of the lake between the Hero Islands and St. Albans and Missisquoi or south of Missisquoi. So that area of the lake there to the right, there's a number of small islands where they nest. And the biggest island, the island that gets used the most, is an island called Papasquash Island. And I say big, it's not very big. It's about the footprint of a house. But annually, we can get anywhere upwards of 150 nesting terns out there, and then add another 200 nesting gulls. So it's a pretty popular place.
Wow, I guess, and I understand these islands are recognized by the state.
Yeah, so recently they have been recognized as critical habitat. And they're the first habitat to be recognized as such. And that's a statute that's kind of similar to calling a bird or an animal or a plant endangered. Critical habitat gives that status to the actual habitat that these endangered and threatened species use.
Fantastic. So it's not a place that most people visit, just people like you. We'll get to that in a minute.
And people that fish around there.
Right. Okay. So give us a little bit more background around terns. So this is a place where both gulls, so they're quite different from gulls, a little bit. Some people can confuse them.
Yeah, here's a common tern sitting on a nest, incubating. You can see they are different than gulls. They have a really pointy red beak and that black cap. And this bird is sitting next to one of the management strategies, the chick shelter. Here's a kind of cool nest. They normally have a clutch of 2 to 3 eggs, and this bird decided to put their nest, or birds, in between decoys that we use to attract them to the island. So I kind of thought that was kind of funny that they chose to have company. And then once the chicks hatched, they come out and they look just like their eggs. They're very cryptically colored. And it takes them anywhere from 21 to 24 days to hatch, and probably just about that same amount of time to fledge, to be able to fly and leave the island with their parents.
So how often do you go out and check? And you do go out actually on the island and check?
Yeah, so we go out. We work with the Fish and Wildlife. So this is a project that we partner with the Fish and Wildlife, and they fund us for this work. And I go out to the islands just about once a week to get an estimate of population numbers, and then monitor chicks. This is often what I see when I'm out there. The birds know me and will dive bomb me and hit me on the head. So this is what it looks like when you're turning around as one of them are coming in to protect their nest. Here I am out on the island. This is what a juvenile bird, or a bird that's maybe 10 days old, looks like. A little bit bigger than that chick that we saw in the first picture. And so I go out on the island, count adults, and here you can see I'm putting a leg band on one of these chicks. And this band has a number on it, so this enables us to keep track of the reproductive success of the birds throughout the summer.
So how are the terns doing this year?
They're doing great. This has been one of the best years that that the terns have had out there, and it's been a little crazy. There's been so many chicks up on the island that have survived. Normally they are under pressure from predation, sometimes human disturbance, but you can see all those chicks lined up at the edge of Papa Squash Island. There were so many chicks that it was difficult for me to catch all of them and ban them. And most of these chicks have fledged. So we're looking for one of our best reproductive years on record.
So it could be tough next year when you go to the island and they recognize you and start many more dive bomb you.
Yeah. So I'll be sure to wear my hard hat when I'm out there. Literally, you can hear them ping off the top of the hard hat as you are out there. And on days that I haven't worn hard hats, I'm sure I have scars up there where they've actually hit me and drawn blood. So they can be very aggressive.
And do you think they know you in particular, or are you the guy that keeps coming back year after year for 30 years?
There have been some studies recently with ravens and so on, and with other gulls that they do have facial recognition. Here's a family unit of terns, and if you look closely, both the adult on the right and the fledgling juvenile on the left have leg bands. So that bird on the right is probably a bird that I banded. It takes them 3 years to be able to come back and breed. So that's a bird I banded probably many years ago as a chick. It's come back. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what happens after the terns leave the island? If there's this 3-year gap, where do they go?
So oftentimes when they leave the island, they'll do just what those birds were doing. They'll stay as a family group and they'll fish together. And then the birds migrate down to the northern shores of South America, the Caribbean. The juveniles will stay there for 2 to 3 years until they reach maturity. The adults will come back every year and nest, across their breeding range and here on Lake Champlain.
And then after 3 years, come back on
and
up.
Then the youngsters come back. So that's really important to this population. We, in studies we've done, we've had about an 80% return rate of our banded birds. So we know these are the same birds that come back year after year. And this year, again, we had probably 230 nesting pairs. And I'm guessing we're going to get 200 plus chicks that fledge. So in 2 or 3 years, we're likely to see a nice bump in numbers from these returning chicks.
Great. Do you have an ultimate goal, or is this just looking good and you want to make sure they're protected?
So the Common Tern Recovery Plan has a goal for delisting as 300 nesting pairs and a goal of downlisting to threatened as 200 pairs. So we've reached that 200 pair level. And now we just need that reproductive success to kind of come up and match that. So this is one of the first years for that. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to hear that terns are doing so well. And it looks like we have a little bit of time for viewer mail, so I'd love to get to that. And we have an email, an image that was sent to us from Diane Hawkins of Richmond. She saw this bird that's been around the house this year, but she'd never seen it before. It's smaller than a red-winged blackbird, she said. Its wings and tail feathers are a little more of an orange color. And she wants you to help provide some identification.
So this is a great little bird. It is a warbler, and it's called an American redstart. And it's got those distinctive orange patches on its wings and on its tail. And because of that, I can tell this is actually a second-year bird, meaning that this bird is at least 2 years old and is a male. The first-year males look more similar to the females. So this is a great bird that we often see and hear singing in young forest, areas that have young saplings coming up. But a pretty common species across Vermont, and always a great one to see.
Yeah, it's great. Looks like it was right on her porch furniture, which is
Yeah,
a little unusual.
It's great when they come up close like that for you.
Yeah. And here's another one from Jane Berry, who's in Highgate Springs. She saw 40 to 50 white egrets at the washout near Highgate Springs, July 21st, near sunset. What a sight, she said. I can only imagine. Why are they gathering now? She asks.
So the great egret, white egret, great egret, is a species that is kind of new to Vermont. They've been around, but they've been showing up in larger numbers. I see them up at the sandbar in increasing numbers. And what's happened is, as the breeding season has moved on, and as these birds have finished up their nesting and have their young with them, they're now just starting to gather in areas that are great for feeding. Mm-hmm. So that area up north of Missisquoi and Highgate Springs, that whole area, very shallow water, great for herons to find, frogs and fish and all of that stuff. So they're all kind of congregated
all right
there.
There.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the question, Jane. It's fascinating. And if you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark at the address on your screen. Or you can drop Mark an email. His address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Send Mark your questions and pictures, and he'll try to find you the answers on an upcoming edition of Bird Notes. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us from the Audubon Center again.
Always great to be here, Fran. Look forward to chatting with you next month.
You bet. Once again, thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.